This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 1247 of Horse Tip Daily, your almost everyday morsel of helpful hints, useful facts, and practical techniques for horse folks. Brought to you today by Kentucky Performance Products. Greetings, horse people. Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily. Today, I'm going to be joined by best-selling author of 101 Dressage Exercises, 101 Western Dressage Exercises, and a few other titles, Jacques Ballew, and she's also got the coolest name in the world, and she's got an interesting take on how to monitor your horse's fitness. And we'll get right to our tip after this from Kentucky Performance Products.
He was her first love, the one that started it all. He taught her how to master the posting trot and navigate her first hunter course. They spent hours together exploring the trails and hanging out in the barn. His name was doodled on every page in her school notebook. His coat gleamed in the sun as he met her at the gate each day, snuffling for a treat. From the first time she saw him poking his head out of the stall to the last time she patted him goodbye, he was, and always will be, her everything. This love story is brought to you by Nalox Advanced, providing complete support for a healthy digestive tract, which reduces the risk of colic and digestive upset. The horse that matters to you matters to Kentucky Performance Products. Call 859-873-2974 or visit kppusa.com to order today.
And I'm so happy to be joined once again by Jacques Ballew, who is a classical dressage trainer in California. And she stops by every so often with some really great advice on becoming a better horseman and taking classical riding to its best result. So how are you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing great, thanks. It's nice to talk with you again.
We have a really interesting topic today, something that it never even would have occurred to me. And then you dropped me an email and I thought, wow, what a clever idea. And it has to do with heart rate monitors of all things.
Yes, heart rate monitors for the horse. Riders could wear their own heart rate monitor if they chose. But the horse, it's very easy to get a horse heart rate monitor. They come in all styles and levels of expense, but you can pick one up pretty affordably. And it's just about maybe a 2 square inch patch, basically, that goes under the girth of the horse, and then one goes kind of near the horse's withers. It just slips under your saddle. And you have those 2 square patches, and they send a readout to a watch that the rider wears. So they're very lightweight. You don't even know they're on. They're very easy to put on. So they are an easy thing to add to your training equipment.
So they're a pretty simple device, and they're available through online, and I'm sure in some areas of the country, local tack suppliers, yes?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can find them easily online, and you could get an entry-level one for well under $100.
Now,
you can find them affordably.
Do they all monitor the horse's heart rate in real time, or does it monitor something and record it and then you go back and look at it later?
No, it's in real time, and that's the real value for arena riders, I believe, because, as you're walking and trotting and cantering that horse and doing your different exercises, you are getting constant fluctuations in the horse's heart rate, and it's right there on your wrist. And that's how I got really interested in this, and I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the few dressage people that I know who uses one somewhat regularly. I used to use it more with the competitive trail riding and the endurance riding. I mean, horse heart rate monitors are very popular in those disciplines. But we arena riders were really missing the value of them. And for me, the value, there's 2 main takeaways here. One is when dressage riders in particular make an estimate about how difficult their horse finds any particular exercise or just current level of training, usually that's based on their best guess. Or sometimes they base it on how much the horse is sweating or how high their respiration is. And neither of those are accurate indicators of a horse's fitness level. I mean, a horse sheds heat through, its respiration. So it's very possible a horse can be huffing and puffing and quite sweaty, but the heart rate could actually be low. So taken abstractly, respiration and sweating are not accurate ways to determine if your horse is finding an exercise difficult. The only true feedback is how high their heart rate is, just like us. So it takes a lot of that guessing and maybe taking things too easy, making excuses sometimes that we all can do to say, well, my horse finds the canter really hard, or, I think that he's a little tired right now. I should give him a break. But, without really looking at the heart rate, you're taking some liberties in making those decisions. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. And it can be the reverse as well. It could be that you don't think your horse is working very hard when in fact he is. If you have a horse,
and that's where we get into recovery. Yeah. And there's some Dutch riders, dressage riders, who are using heart rate monitors and have written some articles about it too. And how it informs their training is it keeps them really on track and accountable. I mean, they may not think they've upped the ante in their training program, but if they're noticing that the horse's heart rate is just a little higher than normal for that horse, like you say, it's an indication that he's fatigued. He may need 1 or 2 days off. He may need to just go do a hack, but he's working at a level. If you're seeing numbers that aren't his normal numbers, that's really useful information. You may have an infection brewing. It could be stress because of some change that's gone on at the barn. There's something going on there, and that's really useful information.
That's fascinating because every discipline, as you move up the levels, the horse's fitness becomes ever more critical. Regardless of whether you're doing dressage or endurance or show jumping, the horse needs to be appropriately fit. And if you've got that real-time feedback, that gives you information, as you said, from the recovery point of view, because you can track his recovery progress. But it also gives you an idea of how fast the heart rate goes up, too, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's different for each horse, obviously, but getting to know your horse and seeing those numbers, and I don't ride with one every day, but about every other week, I'll put it on my training horses and my own horse, and it's just really useful for the things that we're discussing. If I make a transition, is the heart rate doing what it normally does? Is the horse within the normal zones? Or if I'm wanting to make adaptations and push the horse up to the next level of training, you do need to make some of your exercises more difficult. You can't always work at the same intensity level. And a heart rate monitor is just good for knowing, okay, I have added a little bit of intensity. I thought I did. And the heart rate monitor is telling me that, yep, the horse is working maybe at 10 beats a minute higher with his heart rate. So, and want to hold them there for about 10 minutes or something to make the exercise more difficult and make those gains that people want to make to get to the next level, so we don't get stuck always working at the same intensity level.
That's interesting. So let's say I get a heart rate monitor and I want to put it on my horse. How does one go about getting a baseline? Because you need to have you need to have a starting point, because it's all about comparisons. So how would you take the first time you ever use one on a given horse? How do you get started with that so you have a baseline?
Well, that's a good question. And most heart monitors are going to come with just a generic range for walk, trot, and canter. But very basically, a horse would walk between 70 and 80 beats a minute, and they trot between 100 and 115, 120. And this is like real low, minimal, walking and trotting. So you're not trotting up a hill or trotting in hot weather, et cetera, et cetera. But, between 110, 120 would be a normal trot. And then cantering is usually about 120, maybe less than that. I mean, some Arabians canter, their heart rate's about 110, 116, just because they're so efficient in their movement. So those are your general ranges. But like I say, when you bring your horse out for the first time and you put it on, just kind of strolling around at the walk, for example, it's just really interesting to see how they go from a resting heart rate, whatever the horse's resting heart rate is, typically going to be about maybe 45 or 50. And then you start walking them around, just looking at how quickly or not the heart rate, shoots up to 70, maybe 80. And then does it stay there? Because a lot of horses, it'll spike up, but then once you start walking, doing some leg yield, get on with your ride, it starts dropping back down. If they're pretty fit, it actually starts dropping back down. The horses are incredibly efficient at adapting to exercise. But that's the second point that I wanted to make. So there's the helpfulness with a heart rate monitor of not using inaccurate fitness predictors like respiration and sweating level. And then the second piece is checking in with your horse to know when you do need to up the intensity a little bit, as I mentioned. So for an example from my own life, I have a young warm blood in training, and she's like a typical Dutch warm blood. There's a lot of movement, a lot of suspension. So it's easy as the rider, because I'm working hard. It's easy as the rider to think that she's always working pretty hard, And her baseline numbers about 4 months ago were she was trotting about 112 beats a minute, 116. And then, we had some rain. We had some winter out here in California. So I didn't have the heart rate monitor on her in a while. But I kept training her, and I put it on last week, and I was taking her through transitions and working trot and leg yield, and I never got her heart rate over 90. I mean, that is low. I mean, that is like she's half asleep, which is really good for me to know, because if I'm trying to push her towards collection and shoulder in and higher rate exercises, I need a more powerful trot. I need a trot that's taxing her a little bit. Otherwise, I'm not recruiting the right, muscle fiber. But that's another conversation. But, learning your horse's baseline numbers is super valuable for that reason. You go, wow, this horse has a lot of adaptations, which is what you want to see, But it would have been easy for me without the heart rate monitor to keep cruising along, kind of doing what I was doing.
So that's interesting. We're going to some degree, we decide how hard the horse is working by how hard we're working.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting thing to do, because sometimes it's a case of the rider is not very fit, so they feel like they're working hard, therefore the horse is.
Yeah.
It could be that the horse is just very athletic, and as in your case, the horse is incredibly athletic, so it feels like it must be doing a lot because, wow, look at all this movement we've got here. When in fact, it's just a really athletic horse. So that's very interesting. Yet another reason why this would be such a wonderful addition. And if you're one of those lucky people who keep their horse at a barn where there's lots of other riders who are interested in this type of thing, or if you have lots of friends, you can go in together and get one as a group and share it.
Definitely, because like I say, I don't advocate that people use one every day. For dressage, you just don't need to. But it's so helpful in all the ways we've discussed. And then one last way that I'll point out is it can be useful in diagnosing certain training plateaus. Like, for example, I had a young Arab come for training, and he cantered pretty well on one lead, but on the other lead, he kind of buck sometimes and get a little surly, and his owner didn't feel real comfortable about it. And she kind of thought he was just being a punk, just kind of being a bad boy, which he might have been. I didn't know the horse well. So I said, well, let's put the heart rate monitor on and just kind of see what happens. If he is either uncomfortable and anxious about that lead, or it is just physically harder for him because he's so imbalanced, it's going to take more effort on that side, then we should get that evidence on the heart monitor. And that's exactly what happened. On the one good canter lead, his heart rate was about 110 beats per minute. And then as soon as I even asked him to take the other lead, his heart rate shot up to about 120. And then he went into the canter, but it just kept climbing. It got out to about 130. So that's a 20-point difference from one canter lead to the other. So that tells me, wow, there is something kind of going on here physically. The horse is not just being a punk.
Right. That's very interesting. So it's going to give you some insight into the horse's physicality as well. That's interesting stuff. So heart rate monitor, a great device for your equine athlete.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, very useful tool.
Fascinating stuff. So for folks who have further questions and they need them answered, where can they find you on the interweb?
They can go to my website, which is jecballou.com, JECBALLOU, and there's a ton of articles and videos and such on there.
Yep, I'm there right now. All kinds of great, cool, interesting, and inspiring stuff there. And thanks again, Jec, for coming by and doing another tip with us.
Thanks so much. It's been great.
Well, there you have it. You can find links to today's guests as well as lots more tips at horsetipdaily.com. Make sure to have all of your favorite Horse Radio Network shows with you wherever you go by downloading the free Horse Radio Network app for your iPhone or Android. Just go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network. Download it today because it's quick, it's free, and it's easy. Or you can subscribe via iTunes. And thank you again to our sponsor, Kentucky Performance Products. This is Coach Jen, and I'll be back again soon with another tip. So until then, go ride your horse. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements made by guests on the Horse Tip Daily. Please use your own judgment when listening to the tips on this show.